But guys, welcome and thank you for coming. Thank you for coming here to spend a couple of hours of your Thursday evening with me and the Arcan team. My name is Joshua. I am the founder and owner of a Danish company called 1423, and we are a rum company. Everything we do evolves around rum. We blend, we own our own brands, we do distribution, we do export, but we also import for other brands. And one of the brands we import is Worthy Park from Jamaica. And everything we're going to be talking about tonight is going to be evolved around Jamaica. So I hope you're ready for that. You have, each of you have a small sample box. Each box contains 8 different rum that we're going to try throughout the evening. I always recommend that you get a glass of water, both to make sure you stay hydrated. It's summer after all, but also so that you, in between each rum, you can have a small sip of water, just to clean your mouth and clean your palate, so you get ready for the next one. But otherwise, we're just going to start jumping right into it. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go along. Then Pavel can always jump in and ask them in between my talking. Otherwise, we will also at the end, we'll have a break where you can ask all the questions you might have. But yeah, if something comes up during the talk that you want to know a little bit more about, or you need some more details, just let me know and we'll jump straight into it. But first off, welcome to Jamaica. The Jamaican flag is a flag most people probably know. It's quite unique. It's very, very colorful. But actually, the 3 colors of the flag actually also have a meaning. The black color stands for the strength of the people, the power of the people. You have the yellow, the gold, which stands for the sunshine and the natural beauty of the sun. And then you have the green, which is for the island of Jamaica, which is filled with green and agriculture throughout the island. But we're going to dig a lot deeper into Jamaica as we go along. Now, Jamaica, located right here in the Caribbean Sea, next to the Atlantic Ocean. It's the 3rd largest island in the Caribbean, just behind the island where you have Cuba right here. And then you have Hispaniola here, which is divided in between the 2 countries, Haiti and Dominican Republic. And it is actually exactly 8,810 kilometers from the Worthy Park estate in Jamaica and to Bratislava. That is close to a 10-hour direct flight if you were lucky enough to have a flight from Bratislava. But I can always recommend going. It is an amazing island. It's a great culture. It's a beautiful, beautiful country filled with Caribbean beaches. There's plenty of rum everywhere, and there's plenty of good sightseeing. Now, I can go on for hours and hours about Jamaica, and I will. But to get you all started, I want you to find your first rum in your pack and pour it in. It's important that we all get something to drink while we have our talk. I am as well drinking right here. I'm actually drinking one of the rums you can have later today. I'm drinking it here with a grapefruit soda, which is a classic way of drinking it in Jamaica. So let's pour that first rum and let's give it a sip. The first rum we're going to be drinking today is Rumová Gold. It is aged for a minimum of 4 years in ex-bourbon casks that are made from American white oak. It's 100% pure pot still, as all our rums is. There's no added sugar, but we do add a little bit of caramel for consistency to make sure it always looks the same in the bottle. The first one here is what I would call a very light sipping rum. That is both like an everyday sipper you can easily enjoy Monday through Sunday, and it also works quite amazing in a lot of cocktails. Pour it in, just a classic rum and coke, then that Jamaican flavor really comes through. Or go in and make yourself like a Jamaican rum punch, where it also works quite well. Now, if you have 2 glasses, what you're going to do is that you'll have this one in the first one. Then next to it, I want you to pour the second age rum we're going to have here, which is the Worthy Park Single Estate Reserve. Now, we're going to be drinking all the rums tonight in 2s. So we're going to have 2 now, while we go in and speak a little bit about Worthy Park. Then we'll have 2 again, speak more, 2 again, speak more, and then we'll have 2 at the end. So you should have rum in your glasses throughout the evening and throughout my heavy talking as well. But I'd like you to have the gold next to the Single Estate Reserve. The Single Estate Reserve is what we call our flagship brand. It is our high premium, it's an aged rum, it's a pure sipping rum. This one, where the other one is 4-year-old, this is a blend of rum between 6 to 10 years old. Again, no sugar added, nothing added to it. It's 45%, and it is made to be sipped. You can do cocktails from this as well. Like here, we suggest to try using it in an old-fashioned, but I wouldn't do, cocktails with this where you put in a lot of juice or a lot of soda, because this really have so much flavor alone. So it should be enjoyed alone. Now, while you have your 2 rums, we're going to start talking first a little bit about the history of the Worthy Park Estate. After we've gone through the history, then tonight's tasting is divided into 3 chapters. We're going to talk about, first of all, the sugar farm. Then we're going to talk about sugar production or sugar factories. And in the end, we're going to talk a little bit about the distillery and how all the rum is made. Now, Worthy Park itself is the oldest distillery in Jamaica. And there are 6 distilleries in total in Jamaica, but Worthy Park can trace its history back further than anybody else. The estate itself, which is, you could say, just a plot of land in the center of the island, was founded in 1670, where Lieutenant Francis Price, he received a grant of land from the English king because he helped the English king to fight off the Spanish. Now, a few years earlier, the English king had kicked away the Spanish from Jamaica, but the Spanish kept trying to take Jamaica back because of all the wealth they had in their soil. So Francis Price was instrumental in keeping the island for the English. So that's why he got this estate. Now in 1720, the Francis Price and his family, they started sugar cultivation. They started growing cane and they started producing sugar. Then in 1741, the magic happened. Here we can trace through Jamaica's written history that rum was produced at the Worthy Park Estate. Now 1741 makes it the oldest distillery in Jamaica. Now take a distillery like Appleton, which most of you probably know. They started in 1741, so they were 8 years later. A distillery like Hampton came about in 1752, so they were 11 years after. So that's why we're still the oldest. Now then in 1918, the current owning family of the distillery, the Clark family, took over. And it's actually, to this day, it's still that family. It's a local Jamaican family, and it is currently the 4th generation of the family who is in charge. And most of the family are also quite evolved or involved in the everyday day-to-day business. So Gordon Clark, who is the current CEO, manages the sugar factory. His uncle manages the distillery. He has another uncle doing the finances. And like that, all of the family is slowly coming into the business. Now in 1962 is the next landmark, because Worthy Park actually stopped producing rum here. Now, during the beginning of the 1900s, we had 2 very large world wars in Europe. We had the World War I, and we followed by the World War II in the 40s. And these wars messed up the European market. And one of the things that happened because of the wars was slowly that the sale of rum from Jamaica went down. And it went down for that very, very easy fact that when you shipped rum from Jamaica to Europe, you had to ship it on board ships. But once you sailed over the Atlantic Ocean, you never knew what you had laying in wait for you. If it was a German submarine or an English destroyer trying to shoot you out of the water. So it became very, very expensive to buy Jamaican rum. And that's why sales slowly started to go down. And the Europeans started drinking other spirit. We started drinking spirits we could buy at home. So we started drinking more gin. We started drinking more whiskey. In Czech and Slovakia, it was probably Slivovic we started drinking more of, something similar. So in cooperation with the Jamaican government, we stopped production in '62. Now, then fast forward 40 years, 50 years, and Gordon Clark, he had the vision to see what is going on in the world today. He could see that rum had started really selling again. Rum was catching on. Rum sales were booming everywhere in the world. So he decided to unlock the doors of the distillery, build a brand new state-of-the-art distillery with a new still, new fermentation halls, new warehouses, everything, and they started production again. Now, today, as I mentioned, we're going to speak about 3 chapters. We're going to be speaking about the sugar farm, and we're going to be speaking about sugar factory, and in the end, we'll take a trip to the distillery. Now, we're going to talk about all of those 3 chapters for the simple fact that Worthy Park is what we call a single estate. Now, a single estate is something that is quite unique in the world today. But the basics of a single estate is just that we do everything ourselves. It is our own cane fields where we grow the sugar. It is our own sugar factory where we turn the cane into either sugar, molasses, or pure cane juice for the distilling. It's our own distillery where we make the rum. It's our own warehouses where we age the rum, and it is our own bottling that we do at the distillery as well. It means that we control the full circle from the grass to the glass. Now, in today's world, this is very, very unique. You don't have a lot of other distilleries that have that much of a control, because today the sugar industry is dying in the Caribbean. So a lot of sugar producers, well, today everything is made either from beets, or we import the sugar from Asia because they can do it a lot cheaper. So even the molasses that we need to produce from our rum, sometimes, well, it doesn't even come from the Caribbean, or not even from South America. It is actually sometimes even imported from places like India or Vietnam or Pakistan. So having that control and being able to produce everything ourselves is something quite unique. Now, this is a slightly closer look at the island of Jamaica. Now, I've dotted in the 6 distilleries that we have here on the island. We have Hampton Estate up here in the north, right close to Long Pond Distilleries. Then we have the biggest one, Appleton Estate, which is the one we probably almost everybody know of. Then down to the south, we have Monymusk Sugar Factory, also known as Clarendon Distilleries. We have New Yarmouth, which is a distillery owned by Appleton. And then here, dead center in the middle of the country, we have the Worthy Park Estate. This is a close-up of where we are located. Now, Worthy Park is located in between mountains. So this is actually here where you see all the fields. This is a valley that is surrounded by mountains on every side. And this also makes our climate quite unique and quite ideal, actually, for the aging of the rum. But we'll come into that just a little bit later. Now, we'll zoom in a little bit more so we can get a closer look, because this is in the middle of the valley where we have everything. So most of the fields are used for the cultivation of sugarcane. We have the sugar factory here. We have the distillery over here, main offices, sugar packing. And actually, if you see what we have right here under the blue circles, then this is also part of the estate itself. But all of this is housing. So basically small villages in the middle of the rum and sugar factory. And this is where both the Clark family live and a lot of the workers for the distillery. They actually live right there on the estate. Now, this is a look out of the valley. And if you look at the houses you see right down here, then these are actually the houses that you see right over here. So then you get sort of an idea about where we're looking. Now, this is a view down of the valley. And now I've been there many times. And I was just actually getting memories today on my phone, on Facebook, that showed me it was back in 2015 to this very day, so 8 years ago today, that I did my first visit of the distillery. Now, the view when you come up and see this is simply breathtaking, because once you want to go up to Worthy Park, first you have to drive through the jungle. It is trees everywhere, and you're driving on small mountain roads. And if you come in the middle of the sugar season, you really need to watch out, because everywhere in between the jungle, there are small plots of land where they have cane. And if you don't watch out, there'll be a huge cane truck coming out and run you out of the road. This is a closer look at the cane fields, and here you can as well see the mountains in the back. Now, most of the cane at Worthy Park is not harvested by machine like we are doing here. Most of it is actually harvested by hand. And we do that for two major reasons. The first is that when we harvest cane, now cane looks a little bit like bamboo. It gets a lot thicker and it can grow up to be almost 4 meters in height. But when we cut it with a machine, we need to cut it, first of all, 30 centimeters above the ground, which actually means that we are losing out of some of the cane. But also the cane harvesters, the machines, they can only ride on a field that is plain, like you see it here. But because we are up in the mountains, very, very few of our fields look like that. Most of them look like that. And a harvester can't drive up of this because they are very, very heavy in the top, which actually means if we drive up these, it would simply tip over and we would lose both the machine and everything we've harvested. So during the season, the sugar season, which lasts from the first Wednesday of January until just about the 1st of July, this is where we do all of our harvesting. And during that time, we employ more than 400 people in the fields that go out there with their machete 8 hours per day, harvesting the cane. The good thing about a man and a machete is that, one thing, you keep people employed. And employment is a huge issue in Jamaica. So keeping 400 people employed is very important. The second part is that with the machete, you can cut the cane all the way down to the ground. And that way you get much, much more of the cane with you. Now, this should give you an idea about how it is actually happening. You can see it here. The men are working. You can see here in the bottom with their big knives that are used to cut the cane. But it's hard work. It's 8 to 10 hours per day. It's 30 degrees sunshine, which is why you see everybody is covering, they're covering their full body, they're covering their arms, they're covering the head. Otherwise, the sunshine and the heat will simply get to you. But the sun and the heat will also get to us unless we get a little bit to drink. So let's get ready to flush our mouths, clean our mouths, get some water, and we'll start digging into the next two rums. What did you think about the first ones? Are you still alive out there, guys?
Well, I couldn't try those because I'm driving, but I'm taking the samples back home. Maybe others would tell. We have some answers in the chat.
Yep, good. What are people writing? Do you like them? Do you hate them?
I see some heart, so it looks good.
That is usually a good thing.
Yeah, and then maybe some tasting note from Michal. He wrote burnt sugar.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that comes through in Worthy Park, in my own opinion, is you can taste that pure cane sugar. Always. After that, you always get a taste of tropical fruits. There's a lot of banana, especially, not the yellow banana that we have here on the picture, but more that brown banana that we forgot about, that's starting to ferment and start to rot. I think that taste is always there in Worthy Park specifically. But again, in all Jamaican rum in general, you get a lot of these tropical fruit notes. But we're jumping into 2 more rum now, and we're going to start with the Worthy Park 109. This is one of our newer releases. We only launched this about 2 years ago. Now, the rum itself is a blend. It's a blend of what we call our VPL, which is a standard rum, and VPE, which is our high ester, very, very flavorful rum. So we use a 3-year-old rum and blend it with a little bit of white rum, and then we bottle it at 54%. We add quite a bit of caramel to this because we want the dark color for this one. You can also see we call this a throwback to the old days, because this specific product was actually one that has been, I would say, 6 years in the making. Because back in 2015, when I went to Jamaica and visited Worthy Park the first time, I met with their newly appointed export manager, Alexander Kong. He had just started 3 months before, and I was actually the first tour he ever did. And once we started talking about shipping rum first to Denmark and then off to Europe, we started talking about as well, what could be good additions to the lineup? What other products should we develop for the future? And one of the ideas me and him we talked about was a dark overproof. And it comes back to, basically it comes back to the US in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. Back then, you had this cocktail and food culture that we call tiki. And in the tiki culture, it was very famous for elaborate cocktails with a lot of fruit juice, a lot of lime or lemon, a little bit of sugar, and a lot of rum. And one of the rums that were in quite a lot of the recipes from back then was a dark Jamaican overproof. But it's nowhere to be found today. So we decided, let's make our own. And this is what we made. I think it tastes amazing, like a lot of burnt caramel, a lot of like even raisins and dark wood you start to taste. But you can drink this neat easily. But if you like to make cocktails at home, try this in something simple, just like a dark and stormy. Just the rum, ginger beer, and lime. It is outstanding. Try it in your rum and coke. I promise you, you'll have the best rum and coke you ever had. And if you like cocktails, and you don't mind making them either, try and go a little more elaborate and try and make something like a Mai Tai. It really, really works well. On the side of that, we're going to have what I would call Jamaican culture in a bottle, because we're going to be having the Rum Bar Overproof. Now, this is the first rum we launched. We launched it in 2007, 2 years after we rebuilt the distillery. It is, again, what we call a flagship rum. It is by far our best-selling rum. It's an unaged rum that we blend of 3 different kinds of rum we make. There's no sugar added, no color, of course. There's nothing added to it. It's pure rum, but it's rum at 63%. But this is what you could call Jamaica in a bottle. If you ever get the chance to go to Jamaica, you will see that overproof rum is a huge part of the culture. 90% of all rum drunk on the island locally is overproof rum, white overproof. The biggest one is a brand called Ray & Nephew the number 2 is the one you have right in front of you here, Rum Bar Overproof. Now, how do people drink it? Well, sometimes you just buy a bottle, you take it to the party, but a lot of people will go to the local rum bar. Now, there are many legends about Jamaican rum bars. Some say Jamaica is the country with the most bars in the world when you look at their population. Some even went as far as say there's a bar for every 6th person. For every 6 people, there's a bar in Jamaica. That might be a little bit over the top, but there are quite a lot of rum bars. And, you know, to have a rum bar, sometimes it's not more than putting a table out in front of your home in the front garden, put up a few bottles and start selling rum. You have a rum bar. But how do people drink it? Well, people drink it straight as it is, or they will drink it with everything they have on hand. It might just be a splash of water, it might be Coke, it might be Red Bull, or it will be Rum Boom. Boom is the local energy drink. Or they will drink it like I'm drinking it today, which I think is the classic Jamaican way. So Rum Bar Overproof, a bit of ice, and then a splash of ting. Now, ting is a local grapefruit soda, and that, you know, that limey, citrusy flavor of the grapefruit combined with the rum is just delicious. It really, really works well together. Now, this is culture. So people don't only drink the overproof rum. It is also used in other parts of everyday life. Like when you move into a new house, you'll always have a bottle of overproof with you. You'll spray a little bit in every corner just to scare off the demons that might have lived there before. You'll use it in your Christmas cake every year. That cake will be soaked in overproof rum to really, really give it a kick. You'll use it when you do your barbecue. You'll use a little bit of rum in your marinade. Your parents, well, they'll rub it on your chest if you're a kid and you have a cold. So it goes there in all parts of society, in all parts of life. Jamaican overproof rum is always there. It is culture. It is Jamaica in a bottle. Now, but guys, while you enjoy the rum, I'm going to jump into our next chapter, and I'm going to start speaking a little bit about the sugar factory. Because without sugar, there can be no alcohol. And so a sugar factory is necessary for us to make some rum here. Now, as we saw in the timeline before, Worthy Park can trace their sugar production back to 1720. Now, this is a look at one of the sides of the sugar factory. And I started with this picture because the old water wheel here is actually what used to run the whole sugar factory. Today, it is much more automated and everything runs on electricity. But this is how it used to be done in the old days. Now, once we've cut the cane, as we saw in the sugar factories before, all of the cane will be loaded onto huge trucks and it will be driven down to the sugar factory. Now, the first thing that happens before it comes in is that the truck is weighed. So they're going to check the weight of the truck to see how much cane is he carrying. Then it's going to be unloaded. It will be grabbed here, and then we'll start to crush the cane. Now, when we crush the cane, we can separate all the fibers, we can separate all the plant material and only get out the juice of it. Now, and we do this after we weigh the truck because we want to be able to see how much quality and how much juice we get from each single truck, because that we can trace back to each plot of land and see how effective it is. Now, this is how the cane looks when it comes out the other side after being crushed. It's simply destroyed into tiny, tiny little pieces. But that way we get all of the juice out that we want to use for our sugar production. Once it comes out, it looks a little bit like this. So it is, well, in texture, exactly like water. The color, I would say, is going from a light gray to dark gray and still a little bit see-through, because the cane juice is not just a water. It has a ton of different minerals and, of course, a lot of sugar content. Now, we use some of the sugar juice or some of the cane juice we have started to make rum from, but primarily we make our rum from molasses. So we need to take the next step in the sugar factory. So here, this is all the leftovers of the sugar cane. Now, once it is filled up in here, we dry it, then we fire it up and we heat it, because this now produces electricity for the sugar factory. Then we take our juice, we start to heat that up, because when we start to heat it up, we can turn the water that is still there, we can evaporate it, turn it into steam. And the more water we can evaporate, the more we can take that away from it, the closer we can get to the sugar. Now, once we started heating it up, once we get closer and get rid of the water, we can start to centrifuge it, put it through our evaporators to get rid of every leftover waters. And in the end, we will end up with our molasses. The molasses is like a thick, very, very thick, almost black syrup. Now, molasses still have a sugar content of about 50%. And it is those sugars that in time in our distillery will be turned into alcohol or into our rum. In the end, of course, we also left with sugar. Now, Worthy Park Sugar Factory is the largest producer of sugar in Jamaica. Now, if we go back about 50 years, there were close to 50 sugar factories in Jamaica. 3 years ago, there were 6 left. Today, there are only 2. We have the Worthy Park that is privately owned, and then you have a sugar factory called Froome, which is owned by the government. So today, Worthy Park, they produce 6 times as much sugar as the factory in Froome, and we can effectively supply the whole island. It also means that very, very little of our sugar is exported, because we can only just about cover the needs of our own country. So all the sugar stays at home in Jamaica. A little bit leave here and then. Well, that little bit usually come to me here in Denmark. So if you ever want to try the Worthy Park sugar, come find me at a rum festival, or come find me when I'm doing some tastings and master classes with the Alko90 team, and you can probably have a chance to try it. It is quite extraordinary. Ever since I learned about it, I've never used any other sugar in my coffee, my tea, or in my Christmas baking or anything. It's always that. There's so much more flavor than that white bead granulated sugar we usually find here in Europe.
Joshua, can I ask you a question about this?
Yes.
You said that there were so many sugar factories back in the past.
Yep.
And now there are only 2 left. So is the demand for Jamaican sugar on decline, or what is the reason for them to be closed?
So I wouldn't say the demand for Jamaican sugar is in decline. The problem is that the sugar industry in the Caribbean is in decline. Now, Worthy Park, their sugar factory is very, very well maintained. The Clark family have always, well, the sugar factory is their livelihood. This is where they make the primarily of their money and their salaries. It is still 90% of the business compared to the rum distillery, which is only 10%. So they've always put an honor in having a very effective factory. Now, if you look at the other sugar factories in Jamaica, like the factory that is still left, that is called Froome. Now, that factory is 6 times as big as the Worthy Park sugar factory, but they only produce around 20% of the sugar that Worthy Park produces, even though it's much, much bigger. And that has to do with bad maintenance in many cases. And this is the same on islands like Barbados or Trinidad, or even in some countries in South America like Guyana. The sugar industry is so badly maintained that they simply cannot compete anymore. They're getting driven out of the market by Brazilian sugar, or even by sugar from the US, which is primarily made from beets. it's much easier for some of these large countries that have well-established economies, who have new factories. They can produce it a lot cheaper. So that's the reason for it.
Okay, thanks.
But it is a thing that is actually today creating problems, because Jamaica, well, they can supply themselves with enough sugar because Worthy Park can take care of that, but they don't have enough molasses for their full rum production. So Worthy Park is the only distillery on the island that only uses Jamaican molasses. The leftover molasses they have is divided out among the other distilleries, but the other distilleries also have to import molasses from other countries. And this is the same throughout the Caribbean. Country like Barbados, they also have to import molasses from other countries because their sugar industry is dead. It's the same in Guyana, which used to be a huge sugar producing country. They can't supply their own distillery anymore. And this is happening all over the Caribbean, Central America, and even parts of South America because of the sugar industry. More people are planting beets. We are producing beets and sugar in so many other countries. But they are realizing it in some countries. You can see it in Barbados, where they've started to reopen old sugar factories, starting to renew them, make them ready again. And I hope that will happen in other countries as well, because we need the molasses at least. We need to be able to produce more rum. But yeah, this is an overview of the sugar factory, so you can see it in its entirety. Now, guys, before we jump into the next two rum, let me know what you thought about the number 3 and 4. The 109, the dark overproof, and the white overproof at 63%. You are allowed to unmute yourself if you want to let us hear your voices. Otherwise, put it in the chat, and Pavel can tell us. And if you're all too shy, it's also okay.
As far as it's perfect.
Good. There was a little bit of an echo, but I heard somebody say perfect.
Well, for me, the first contact with the 109 was when I joined Akan. Dusan gave me it as a birthday present, and I was really overwhelmed with the strength, with the concentration of the flavors. So for me, the 109 is like really think about the heart. Like
yeah,
I have really good memories about that bottle.
That is very good to hear. Very good to hear. It's one of my favorites as well because it's so versatile. You can drink it neat, you can drink it on ice, you can use it for every possible cocktail you can imagine. I always have a bottle of that in my home. That is for sure. Cool. But guys, I will recommend you that if you're using the same glasses, put a little bit of water in them now, clean them out before we dig into the next two rums. The next two rums that we're going to be enjoying are two limited editions that we released 2 years ago. Both of these rums are sold out quite a while ago. So what I did is that I found a couple of bottles in my warehouse, and that's how we did the tasting sets for this tasting. Because I thought instead of just selling the bottles or drinking them myself, then let's share them with as many people as possible. So this is the very last of them. So I really hope that you will enjoy them. There are two bottles we're going to be having now. We're going to have the Madeira, and we're going to have the Port. Both of them we launched in 2021. The base of them is VPL. That we will try later as well, which is one of our base rums. It was distilled in 2010. Then first we put it to aging in ex-bourbon for 8 years. Then we took out the rum and put it into ex-Madeira wine casks and ex-port casks. Then in the end, we bottled it at 45%. Now, both were limited, and we produced only around 1,500 bottles of each. So they are very, very limited, because that was not 1,500 bottles of each for Slovakia. That was 1,500 bottles of each for all of Europe. And if I remember correctly, you only had around 24 bottles of each that made their way down to Slovakia. So I really hope you enjoy them. When you drink them, I would start with the Madeira, have a sip of that first, then jump into the port after, and then you can compare them from there. These will even benefit if you think they are a little bit too strong. You can add a drop of water, because it will help to open it up a little bit, as well as take the alcohol down just a little bit. So it's always a good idea, but just 1-2 drops, nothing more. It's plenty just to help it. While you enjoy that rum, we're going to talk about the main thing about Worthy Park, of course, and the main thing about why we're here today. We're going to be talking about the distillery, the most beautiful place you can imagine. Now, I remember when I was in Jamaica back in 2015, and I did my first tour of the island. I spent a full month, 4 weeks, traveling around the whole of the island. And on my trip there, I saw 4 different distilleries. Now, Worthy Park was the last distillery I visited, but I fell in love when I came here. The place is so extraordinary. It is one of the most beautiful places on earth here in the valley. And the feeling you got from the people at the distillery, it was, like seeing a long lost friend or coming home to family. So I fell in love immediately, not only just with the rum, but also the people, the surroundings, the distillery, the factory, everything. Now, we produce different kinds of rum at Worthy Park, and we're going to speak a little bit about them. But how do we make rum? Well, of course, everything starts with the sugarcane that we came through before. Then we move it to the distillery so we can produce our sugar and we can produce our molasses. Then when we start to create our rum, what do we do? Well, we take our molasses, we put in a little bit of water, and then we add yeast. Because when you combine yeast and sugar, yeast will, so to say, start to eat away at the sugars. And when yeast eats sugar, it creates alcohol. Now, at Worthy Park, we work with 3 different kinds of yeast. We use what we call a dry activated yeast. Now, this can also be described as a commercial yeast. This is a yeast that everybody can buy. Then our primary yeast is the number 2 here. It's an isolated proprietary yeast. Now, this is a yeast that we have extracted from our own sugarcane. And then the third one, and which is, I would say, the most fun one, especially for us rum geeks, is wild yeast. So this is something that forms naturally in the environment around the distillery and in nature. Now, our wild yeast is made in these 4 tanks you see here. They're all made of wood. On the top, they are not closed, they're completely open. Now, in here, we add a secret blend of molasses, cane juice, and actual cane stalks that we put in there. Then for weeks, this concoction just stands there simmering about, and it will create live bacteria, it will create live yeasts that we will use in the fermentation of our high ester rums. Now, high ester rums, we'll talk a little bit more about in the end when we try our last 2 samples. Now, these are our fermentation tanks. We have 6 of them. Each of them have 88,000 liters. They are all closed fermentation, and our fermentation usually go from 30 hours up to 3 weeks, sometimes even 4 and 5 weeks. Now, we produce 4 light rums that are our main rums. It's standard, it's 30 hours fermentation. The tanks here are temperature controlled, and in the end, we end out with an ABV or an alcohol percentage of about 8-9% in the tanks. Then we have our heavy rum production. Here, the fermentation is not 30 hours. It is almost a month. We don't control the fermentation at all. We basically just leave it to do whatever it wants and develop all the flavors. And in the end, we end up with what we call cane wine or cane beer of about 5 to 6% alcohol. Once we've done our fermentation, this is what it looks like. This is on one of the first days when you've combined the molasses with the yeast and the water. Then it just sits there and combines. It creates alcohol, it creates flavor, and the longer it sits, the more flavor you can create. Now, in the end, we will put everything into our still. And in Jamaica and at Worthy Park, we use what we call a double retort pot still. It is the traditional and authentic way of creating Jamaican rum. Now, a pot still creates heavy-bodied, full-flavored rum. You can't create what you could call a light rum. You can't create something similar to like Bacardi on a pot still, because the pot still creates flavor. This is our beauty. It is created in Scotland at a place called Forsyths. It has a capacity of 18,000 liters, and it takes about 5 hours for this to produce the rum. Now, how do we produce it? Well, from our fermentation back here, once this is fermented and it has created the initial alcohol where we have about 5 to 9%, then we add all the fermented. We add it in here, and it will be inside of this big tank. From there, we can start to heat it up again. If you remember earlier when we talked about the sugar factory, we also heat up the juice in order to evaporate the waters and take out the sugar crystals. The concept is a little bit the same here, because here we heat it up again, but we heat it up for a slightly different reason, because what we want to extract now is not sugar, it's alcohol. And here is the magic word, it's 82 degrees, because at 82 degrees, alcohol starts to evaporate, where water doesn't evaporate before we hit 100 degrees. So by controlling the temperature here, we can actually separate water and alcohol. So once we go through our pot still here, we will hit about 9% of alcohol here. So once we come through it, we go over here, and we will have hit 30% once it reaches our first retort. Here, we will reheat it again. And once we get over to the third retort here, we hit 60%. Once more, reheating. And at the end, we come out of the still over here at about 85 to 87%. And that is our rum. Now, once we've distilled it, our initial fermentation and wash that looked like this has now become completely pure and completely clear. So once it comes out here at the end at 86%, it looks like water and there is no sugar left. It's pure rum. Now, I briefly mentioned Bacardi before. And well, when we talk about rum, we need to talk about Bacardi as well. Bacardi, or maybe products like Captain Morgan, is how many rum drinkers start. We start with our Bacardi or Captain Morgan when we are teenagers and we get drunk at parties. And then maybe in time, we will move on to drink real rum, or better rum at least. Now, we use the pot still, which is the oldest way of distilling in the world. It is a craft process that is slow and expensive. Now, brands like Bacardi or brands like Captain Morgan, they use that, which is a multi-column. It's modern, it's industrial, it's fast, it's cheap, and it's easy to use. The huge difference is that our beauty here over here, the pot still, can create medium and heavy flavored rum, where our multi-column over here creates very, very light rum with little flavor. So you could say it's artisanal versus industrial, or rum versus alcohol, which is a little harsh. But it's also 230 liters per hour. versus 2,500 liters per hour. It is 10 times as fast and 10 times as cheap to use the big multi-column. But we stick with our traditions at Worthy Park. So we only use the pot still. Where you see today, a lot of distilleries have put in the column still, even in Jamaica as well. We only do it with the pot still. All of our products is 100% pure pot still. Now, after we've distilled it, of course, some of it will go straight into like the white overproof we tried before, but a lot of it will also go into our aging warehouses. Now, currently we have about 10,000 barrels that have been aging since 2005. We have each year 4 to 6% of the angel share. And if you don't know what angel share is, then imagine that these barrels, they're made of wood. And even after cutting them down from a tree, wood is still a living thing. And that means it breathes. But it also means that throughout the aging, you let air in and air comes out, and slowly some of that rum from the cask will evaporate. Now in Scotland, you lose about 1% every year when you produce whiskey. In Jamaica, we lose all the way up to 6% from the cask every year. We only use ex-bourbon barrels primarily. They are once used American whiskey barrels made of American white oak. Majority of them come from a big company called Brown-Forman. They are also the producers of Jim Beam whiskey, which you probably know. We've also started putting in ex-port barrels, ex-Madeira barrels, as you just tried. We also have some ex-cognac and ex-Calvados casks that you might have an opportunity to try a little bit later this year. So, aging in the Caribbean compared to aging in Scotland is highly, highly different. Not only is the angels a lot more greedy in Jamaica and they drink a lot more from the casks, but because of the high humidity we have and the high temperature and tropical climate, it also means actually that the rum ages faster. And it is said that aging in Jamaica is about 2.5 times as fast as it would be in Scotland. So imagine a 10-year-old Jamaican is actually the equivalent of a 25-year-old whiskey. Then you get an idea about what that tropical climate is actually doing in the barrels. It's basically kickstarting that aging, and it just moves faster. It takes a lot more flavor from the wood, from the barrels, a lot more quicker. So, final step after we've aged our rum is, of course, the blending and the bottling. Now, for the blending, we have our own senior blender. His name is Craig Nicholson. So whenever we do new productions of rum, it is his job to go into the warehouse, pick out the right casks, pick out the right rum, combine them all together so that when we put it inside of the bottle, the products always taste the same. Now, when we speak about Jamaican rum, one thing that almost always comes up is esters. And we're going to talk a little bit about it before we have the next two rums, because for that, esters is quite important. Now, what is esters? Well, esters is basically molecules. They're molecules that start to being created during the fermentation. They come through the distillation, and they can evolve during the aging in the barrels. Now, there are many kinds of esters out there. Now, when we speak about Jamaican rum, we only speak about one of them, and we speak about the one called ethyl acetate, which is a very important contributor to the taste and the aroma of the rum. Ethyl acetate is specifically important in the sense that it gives us a lot of these tropical fruit notes that we talked about earlier. Now, it is usually measured, esters, it's measured per hectoliter, per 1,000 liters. And in order to best understand it, then think about esters as flavors. So there's esters all around us. There's esters in your food. There's esters in your soda. There's esters in your water. There's also esters in that Bacardi rum we talked about earlier, or the Captain Morgan rum, or the local Slivovich. There's esters all around us. Now, but if we look at Bacardi and Captain Morgan might have 4 or 5 esters, where the Jamaican rums we've been drinking today, most of them, well, they started at 60 and then they went up from there. Now, but in order to understand them, we're going to taste esters instead. So we're going to take 2 of the rums we produce at the distillery. We're going to start with VPL, which stands for Worthy Park Light. This is our base product and what we produce in the largest quantity at the distillery. It's molasses, it's 30-hour fermentation, and this one has around 33 esters. Now, off the still, this comes off at 85%. In your packs, I've diluted it to 70%. So remember, 70%, it is still quite high in alcohol. So try and make sure to take, small sips, so you really can feel all of that flavor, all of that aroma. So take a small sip, wrap it around your mouth, let it linger in your mouth a little bit before you swallow it, and then feel the flavor. Now, go ahead, guys, fill up your glass and try that. Once you've tried that, then we're going to go into more extreme, and we're going to be trying the one called VPE or WPE, Worthy Park Extra. Now, this is Worthy Park's highest rum. It's wild yeast, it's 3 to 4 weeks fermentations, it molasses, and this specific one was a special batch that came out at 990 esters. Now think about it as 990 flavors compared to 5 flavors in a Bacardi. It's also 85% off the still, but as well as the other, we watered this one down to 70% so you can better taste it. This is not a rum, you could say, that was made for drinking. It's primarily made as a blending component, so we can add a lot of flavor to something else, but we also started aging this, so there will probably be some bottles of it in the future. But give them a taste, and I would love to hear your comments right now, guys, how you like them. Unmute if you're up for it, and let me know what you think. Otherwise, I'm going to keep pestering Pavel to tell me what he thinks, even though he doesn't have the rum with him.
Well, we had some messages about the previous rums, so maybe I will read them to you. And in the meantime, guys, if you want to add something, feel free to unmute yourself and say or just write anything in the chat. So Michal told it was for the first overproof rum bar that he thought that the overproof one was better than the 109, and he compared it to Rumfire from Hampden.
Yeah,
and he says that the rum bar is better. So nice.
Thank you, Michael. I agree, of course.
And then Daniel writes that the Madeira cask reminds him of Port Mourant.
Yeah, I can see where that comes from, for sure. Yeah.
Then Andre said that Madeira is more smooth and flavored. Port is much more strength in taste of flavor, sugar caramel.
Yeah. Good.
And then there was some Michal wrote that Brown-Forman is Jack Daniels. I think you mentioned Jim Beam.
Yeah, I said Jim Beam. Yeah, it's very true. Yeah.
And about the white rum, so I didn't try those yet, but I'm taking this pack home, so I will taste it right after I arrive.
I think that's a very, very good idea.
And so far, nobody mentioned anything about these VPE or VPL.
Well, let them have the time to taste them, and we'll dig more into them.
Yeah.
So Guys, if you ever come to Jamaica, I advise you to go to the distillery. There are tours every day, and it is one of the most amazing distilleries you can actually see in Jamaica, because you get to see everything. Not like if you go to some other distilleries where you get what I would call a tourist trap tour, where they show you everything nicely painted, everything nicely set up for you, and half of it might not even be actual equipment, but just props used to show you how it works. And you also get to try all of the rum there. So that's a plus. And you get to try their own rum punch, which is quite amazing. I do advise, if you go there, only drink one rum punch before the tour, because they're quite strong. Now, what do we need to remember from today's tasting about Worthy Park and about Jamaica? Well, we are Jamaica's only single estate producer. There is just us. It is pure pot still distillation only, no column stills. Authentic Jamaican rum. We're Jamaican owned and operated, family owned and operated as well. It is, when you support it, the money goes back into Jamaica. It's not like supporting a huge conglomerate that is probably based in Europe or the US. Now, at the end, guys, we'll take questions. I'm going to break off the presentation in a few minutes so we can see each other and you can ask your questions. But just to wrap it up at the end, if you want to support us or follow us, well, you can find us on Instagram, of course. We are on Facebook, and you have our websites here. So, of course, you can go follow Arkan locally, which imports Rum Bar and Worthy Park into Slovakia. And we are going to do more events in the future in Slovakia as well, and not behind the computer. So it's a great opportunity to join if you follow there as well.
Yeah, and maybe I will add the Alko90 eShop. I'm sure all of the guys know this eShop because they bought this tasting set from there. But yeah, also it would be nice if you could follow our socials there. But yeah, thank you very much, Joshua, for your presentation. Thank you to everyone for joining. I think I will just stop recording now, and we can just talk a bit more if you feel like, maybe ask some questions. So I'm stopping the recording.